to get started.
Yes. So, welcome everybody. We don't have Stefan, who works on a lot of the stuff. He's at Citrix Energy today in San Francisco, but in Frederica, the landscape team's not here. The general idea is to define implementation for some lockdown policy configuration settings in using a desktop, specifically what's interesting to corporate business desktop users, since they're the ones using this. And so Stefan did some work on which Unity settings make the most sense. We also have a list of common policies and configuration settings.
Have I mentioned that I love your system administrator?
Oh, Ryan?
Yes. He's a really cool guy.
Stefan did that. I don't know if he was sucking up to you, or I think it was actually random, but appropriate nonetheless. So these are in here, and I guess the idea would be the landscape team may implement something to push these policies and configuration settings out to clients, or that any other free software that admins may want to use could do the same.
This is the spreadsheet I saw earlier, and it's not lucky.
Yes, it's. I just created a spec and linked it from the blueprint.
Perfect. So the mandatory applications is very, very interesting because it kind of intersects in a weird way with another session we had earlier about how we have this weird situation that, say for example, we have Thunderbird on the CD, and next cycle we decided to change to Gear or something. So we would have Thunderbird as a default application in the launcher. And then the user installs their system, and maybe they want to get rid of LibreOffice off their account. So they do that. And the way that works now is the list of icons on the launcher is stored as just a list. So the problem with that is that we take the thing that's in the defaults, which is containing Thunderbird and LibreOffice, and we copy that up to the user section and remove the LibreOffice. So now we've written Thunderbird into the user section. Even though we haven't actually done anything with Thunderbird, we explicitly record Thunderbird right now. So in the future, when we change the default mount plan from Thunderbird to Geary, the user has explicitly written Thunderbird here, even though they never expressly specifically care about it.
Right.
So we want to make that a little more interesting, and tying that in with forcing certain applications to be mandatory. That's going to make that even more interesting.
But how do you expect to let the user express the fact that he's just interested in having the default design as opposed to specifically pinning down the Thunderbird launcher?
Well, the fact that the user made no specific interaction with removing Thunderbird and adding something else means that we think that they don't have anything. Yeah. Because they didn't express anything.
That makes sense. That should be.
But as we do it now, as soon as they change anything, we assume that they care about the exact content of the whole.
So, I think these use cases, pushing specific settings, are more likely to be done by a sysadmin who's going to define all that and know exactly when he's moving X number of users from one email client to another. Whether that happens on upgrade or...
Well, the launcher application case is interesting because in terms of what the sysadmin would want to do there, clearly you have the idea that there should be mandatory applications that cannot be removed. But that allows for the possibility of people to add their own as well, yes?
Yes.
But we might also consider the situation where we don't want people to be able to add their own at all.
Yeah. So I mean that's the launcher lockdown. Yeah.
So I think that's almost like the same thing, right? It's just coming in two different.
Yeah.
It's two different user stories or use cases.
Yeah.
Depending on.
But they are closely related. Yeah.
And then I guess the opposite of that would be that they can remove things but not add things of their own. I guess that's slightly less likely to be something that you care about. And I'm just trying to get my head around, because I'm thinking about working on this long-standing key settings list feature cycle, and that's sort of how I envision this working.
Yeah.
For the reason I mentioned before, that we don't just want to copy a list of here's the launcher items.
So that's a prerequisite for any kind of lockdown support in the launcher.
Well, no, it's the way that the launcher should be done same thing, so that we avoid this issue of if we change the defaults. but it's also a really great way to introduce these kind of object features, because then if we don't just have an opaque list, but here's the list of items in the launcher, but rather we have individual items representing an application, then we can say lock this one, lock this one, lock this one. Because otherwise the only way we could do it is like have a separate key for mandatory launcher items or something like that, and then lock that one down. So it almost be like there's two different keys that list the launcher items, and like one of them the user can change and the other one they can't, and this one happens to be locked down. Just kind of stupid.
So in terms of action items necessary to add lockdown support, like the animal lockdown support in the launcher, I want to summarize that idea in the document.
I think to do it in any reasonable way, key settings will stuff us out.
You already used to.
You're accessing the path, you're getting access to the.
Yeah, it's just
Right, which is looking for the right time. Now I'm on it.
All right.
That's the problem.
Do you want to start by saying
Default
you,
keys for every time. So there can be like a list of items and you can say like, this is the default.
Okay, perfect.
And this is all.
So
Yeah, so you'd have your list of items at the system level, and you could lock them. Some of them you could lock, or you could lock the entire thing, and then the user can change anything. And right now, the way the locking is it's very much like 1-0, right? We can either lock the entire panel
the entire list or
or it's free for all. But there's no individual.
And this is where it's the same for defaults. I imagine it's where it's the same for defaults as well. So you can determine whether or not the key is a default or not. By checking whether or not it's a default value. But then as soon as you change one item, that list, the entire list is now a default.
Yes, exactly.
So we can
It's very much overlapping.
Were there other interesting settings around it you want to discuss around?
Well, I think this list is, most of the other items in this list are a little bit less interesting. I mean, they're just like things that probably will have to add a key for. Like the things like you can't launch a terminal or something like that. That's just something that anything that would be opening a terminal has to check at that point. I'm not going to start a terminal because this key is true, right?
Yeah.
And that's just going to be explicit hooks that get implemented in the software. The ones that interest me more are the ones that involve making illegal changes to deconf. Because opening a terminal doesn't change deconf, right?
Right.
So I can't control that at the deconf level. But in terms of things that involve making changes to deconf, expressing different ways of allowing certain types of changes to occur but not other types of changes, that's what really interests me. And that launcher example is sort of like, it's a really great use case for that, because we have like all different kind of use cases. Like we want nothing changed, we want these ones, but we allow people to add things and we remove them later. We have some default items there that they could remove, but these default items they can't remove. Like that's really the really interesting use case.
how would you call this again? Writing down some more items.
G settings list.
G settings list.
Yeah, it's a feature that's been playing for a while, and I just haven't found the time to take it.
So G settings list support.
They like G settings list like the key case.
All right.
So I guess just on the shortcuts as well, most of these, the Alt F2 and Control Alt are handled through the window manager room. And I don't really see that much you can like it. You actually like keep buying grabs and stuff. With little shortcuts to work. I can't do anything ways to manage from all in one place. So we'll need to have some way to lock down settings to the account as well.
We have an interesting point on our IRC.
This is going to also try the thing that's being locked down. What does this have to do with what I was saying?
That's a good point.
Sure.
Yeah, so probably show that in the launch.
Definitely.
And indicate that there's a reason that you can't remove this, and it's not just like some UI glitch that.
Yeah. So MPD, are you proposing a generic, like, let's say, UI element template to use in that case? Like there's a lock in some cases that was
Yeah, but I don't think we want to draw like a little lock on
right
each
everywhere.
one.
Right. Yeah.
So tiny little electric shocks delivered through the mouse, something like that.
You should know that.
The design could literally just be that, like, when you try to pull the one, try to find how to remove it or reorder it, it just doesn't like all of it. It just kind of like comes a little bit out.
Yeah, but like you might think that that's a glitch, right?
Or,
Yeah.
I mean, previously we had discussions with Ryan, or I was chatting with him, and so you were suggesting that for the control center elements and other dialogues, even if they were to use the standard deconf facilities, we needed something that is quite specific to the various dialogues again, or settings to use, which means that
Well, for simple cases, you don't need that. But the launcher is not a simple case.
right, so there is the launcher and there are probably other cases, and so could we use that list, actually, the list of lockdown options you're proposing as a target for 1210, and then see for which of those options it would take a specific design, for example, because I don't know if the dialogue is quite involved or it's quite complex, versus having some generic mechanism.
Well, I think that's the plan. Like,
Yeah.
the generic mechanism will work automatically in some cases.
Right.
But those are the interesting ones from the standpoint, because those, like, these are the features we need to have, right?
Yeah.
Already any setting on the system can be locked down. So anything that's in debuff can be locked down now.
Right.
And if that's hooked up to some checkbox somewhere in UI, that will already be grayed out. That's already over. So these are the new things that we have to add that are sort of the more interesting things already.
Right. So for each of the elements on your list, there is a design action, or there can be a design action, and maybe MPT can tell us whether. Again, I'm
Yeah, I'd say
focusing on the
for
right
this list, yeah, these are going to be the ones that are a little more interesting. I just thought of another use case, by the way. Do we allow reordering of locked panel items? Like, can we move them down to the bottom? Do we insert things above them? Do we insist that they're always at the top? Is that
I think that's another thing that you'd want to have the ability to lock down, sure.
right.
People who can't add or remove, but can maybe reorder.
Yeah, so you could reorder, but do we say that they must always be at the top? Like, you can't insert your custom items on top of them? So that's interesting.
Yes.
So MPT, the way, if the user has made a change to this configuration that is allowed, and then the administrator decides that that change is suddenly unallowed, the way deconf works there is, even though the change is in the user's database, when the key is read back, it will see the policy and ignore what the user did. So the next time they log in after, or even if they're logged in when the admin makes the lockdown, because lockdown setting changes can be live, when that happens, it will just be the configuration that the admin required.
So, is there anything on the specification, both the design Unity settings piece and the overall kind of desktop settings piece that is of a particular concern, or is there anything we've got here?
Well, just as I was mentioning earlier, just the things that are to do with key bindings have to be handled through So just the action item there is setting itself down within Commerce config, which basically means that I need to merge our arrangement to do that.
Do you have a gsettings bind equivalent in the Commerce config abstraction? So the way this automatic lockdown feature works is in gsettings bind. It's actually really evil, but it works really well. you bind to a geobject property on a specific geobject, right? So in addition to the property that you're requesting to bind to, it looks at the geobject that you passed it, and if that geobject has a property with the name sensitive and the type Boolean, then it will set that to false if the key is not writable, which of course covers GTK widgets. So without knowing about GTK, it can set GTK widgets as sensitive.
Right.
So you would need some equivalent functionality.
So you just need, so there just needs to be a book that says like setting this writable or not.
Yeah, so there's G settings is right.
And just
So
this writable is your abstraction, and then we just need, I think, the back end for that. I think we already
No,
have
G settings is writable is it's the authority. It will tell you if you can write to the set.
And then what's the property of that?
Well, I'm saying the property set uses G settings as writable when binding to geobject property binding is basically you say I want this G settings value to equal this property value in this geobject.
Right.
So you say like you bind a certain Boolean setting to like the active property on a checkbox. So the checkbox, if you check it, it will be true, and if you uncheck it, it will be false.
Right.
And this is how you usually make preferences dialog boxes and settings. So when you establish this binding, you get this side effect that if the setting is not writable, then that checkbox will be graded.
Right.
So you just need to wire that, because I mean CCSM is a whole bunch of sliders and checkboxes and stuff like that anyway, right?
Right. So I mean, and all I need is just simply config like everything that says like whether I'm saying it's writable, which I think.
And
the abstraction already
then you need to bind that to the.
And then you need to bind that to the property.
Well, you need to bind that to the sensitivity of the widgets that would modify that property.
Right. So you need to bind the sensitivity to the widgets that will modify that property to G settings is writable for the abstraction.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so just put an action item there for implement the notion of writable keys in context.
And like the
And
mechanism
we need this
is,
for override in the context anyway, which I just haven't done it. So, well, the sensitivity not, yeah, right. So,
the mechanism for that is like self-evident, obviously. It's like if you can't write to the key,
yeah,
write
then
to the
figure
widget.
out that. Of course, the more interesting case comes when you can add and remove certain items to lists.
Yeah, that is a lot more interesting. And honestly, I don't know what the lockdown is going to look like for that entry setting. So that's something I'm going to have to spend a lot of time on.
Right. Well, we're not at this point.
What's your launchpad name, Sam?
Essence Bills.
Sorry, what's that? Oh.
Just like any compound.
MBT, what you said is yes. That's how it will be. It's interesting that you raise that point because that's not something that we discussed. The provision for preventing specific certain items from being added. That's really hairy because, like, when I add an item, like say I add an item and then I modify all the properties of the item that I added so that it really looks like the one that you wanted to be disallowed. That's kind of weird. I don't know how that would work. Like certainly preventing certain items from being removed is easy, but preventing specific items from being added is very difficult because how do you decide if it is the forbidden thing? It's almost like a virus checker. It's like we have like signature databases of.
So it doesn't need some reference to like the fact that like application action for the true is kind of a space from the beginning, and then like
Yeah, but that
trying to figure out
case like you can only add it if it's not like equal to this desktop file, but then like the user could just like make their own copy of that desktop file, rename it, and add it anyway.
Unless you start throwing SHA-1 sums all over the place.
Yeah, that case is really weird.
Yeah.
well, I mean like do we really have to know what happened to the case?
So yeah, if it's the whitelisted case, that's a lot easier to reason about, I think.
Like whitelisting is fine, I think blacklisting is also doable, but there's no sense in a huge list at all. I mean like unless you can have some sort of abstraction in that, or just provide access to the abstraction. Where
See, the thing is, The items that you add are not just simple G-variant values. They're actually subdirectories in the dconf database. So they can have like all sorts of attributes. And the reason that was defined is the original idea for your G-settings list was defining things like GNOME terminal profiles or accounts, where each profile has quite a number of keys in it. So for the launcher case, each one would have like desktop file equals. But I mean, it could be that we want specific things about certain launcher items in the future. I don't know, maybe we want to support changing the color of the tile behind it or something. And then you have to sort of start matching on like, this property is not equal to something. Like you need to define a whole language for that. It becomes kind of weird.
So that's extra lockdown features that go into dconf, or are we still in the G-settings?
G-settings list.
Right.
Yeah, so in order to support G-settings lists, dconf has to have some support wired through certainly. Which is why it hasn't been done yet, because it's really a big problem and it involves changing a lot of code at the same time. So I basically need to like have a month or two where I can sit down and be like, okay, this is when I'm going to do it without other distractions. Because every time I try to do it, I get pulled on something else, and then
in order to explore all of the corner cases,
yeah, it's a really, really thorny issue.
What I'm wondering, however, is that if we're looking at the list here, how much of those options would require G-settings list versus plain use of dconf lockdown features that exist, plus design feedback.
So the launcher is the obvious one.
Right, so launcher is the one where we have this problem. What about the other options? Are they like straightforward application of...
So most of the other ones will be things like we introduce a new key that prohibits a certain action from occurring. We set it to true and we modify it to true. And that requires no additional support in dconf. It requires patching the application that is performing that.
The only one that I can think of, I mean, it's a pretty complete spec. The only one that I can think of that doesn't appear to be here is the launcher, whether it's there all the time or whether you have to go and find it where it hides.
You mean like if it's subject to being in the operating?
Yeah.
Wait, you mean the recording functionality, or do you mean the auto-hide of the
No,
launcher?
no, I mean, sorry, I mean the auto-hide of the launcher.
Okay, yeah, you're right. It's
Having it fixed always out and the user can't change it, or having it...
Yeah, so that's really easy to do.
Yeah.
Just change, as the admin, you set that to true in the dconf.
We just need, we just need to put it in the spec,
today.
But we just need to put it in the spec, so we think it's...
Well, it doesn't even need to be in the spec, you can already do it.
But the user can still then go and
No, they
change
can't.
it. They can't.
No.
Okay.
So, if you don't mind, do you have a US keyboard?
No.
Oh, yeah. So if you pop open a terminal maybe, and you do like do gdbus monitor, and then you need to do like -- session. It has tab completion, yeah, and then hit it again. And put ca.dconf. And then tab complete that, and then again. / it'll be ca dconf writer or something. You want the user one, ca desert dconf writer user. And then hit it a couple more times. Oh, maybe that's enough. Just hit enter. Okay, good. Now go to the control center thing that's controlling whether the launcher is shown or hidden. Yeah, so already you see, so that's a bug that it actually wrote those keys when it started out. That's not good. But you can see that it actually changed it. If you look at the terminal now, there's that launcher hide mode key. So you could go in and you can introduce that key as a system. Are you familiar with the system level like .d directories?
Yeah.
So you can put that in a key file and put it as a locked value.
Yeah.
And then probably even in the UI, it would be grayed out already. And even if it wasn't grayed out in the UI, the user would not be able to change it. And even if they could change it in the UI, it wouldn't actually do it.
Yep.
Do we have more for the landscape team?
Yep.
Yeah. Are there anything specific we need to support this for landscape? Which of those settings?
That's a broad question.
Yeah.
I don't know this time.
And then there are also a few settings, Chris, around Firefox.
Oh, yeah.
In those settings, they're stored not in decomp or they in decomp. Sorry, I'm not trying to do a good job.
Yeah,
What's the thinking around how? I mean, there are a few of those settings are Firefox related. So what's the thinking on how we can accomplish that?
We had a brief chat about it a few weeks ago. And I think we could provide a way of locking down system size without converting the whole system to speed.
That'd be fun.
It would be fun.
It'd be fun if you did.
So, for example, when you see you could match to do.
Yeah, I think we could provide a way of locking down systems like D without converting the whole thing.
By using Ubuntu's configuration system, there's a provision for lockdown there, or
There is
so how would you see the
actually,
interface?
they're much smoother.
So how would you see the interface between what exists in the capabilities, the rest of the desktop, and maybe landscape? Well, so it's that exposing some of the lockdown support that exists in Thunderbird or Firefox, for example, via input keys, or just
Yeah, basically, yeah. So we would have a decomp database with some additional source of preferences, and those preferences would be set up. There is a provision for local preferences.
and that would even an extension, or
No, it would
or
be an
just a
extension.
patch?
No, yeah, no, you could do it as an extension.
So MVP, what do you think about these kind of tools where you log into a guest session and you change the settings that you're interested in being the way that you like them to be, and then when you log out, it presents you of a list of them, and you can decide which ones you want to lock down. Do you like that kind of UI, or do you want something a little more explicit? And I guess another follow-up question to that would be, we have key setting schemas that have a summary and description of each key. What if we just, through the admin, had a list of these and let them browse through that to decide what they want to do? Yeah, so maybe that's what we should aim to do. I mean, we already have, like, Robert is the maintainer of the decomp editor. It's not good right now. We have some plans to make it better, even this week. Maybe he could add some kind of mode that makes it easier for admins to, like, possibly save out a file that contains the settings that need to be locked down or something. And he added search support just a couple of days ago.
I don't know if or could we go through the list of options and try and find the ones that would be easiest to implement access there in order to support for 12.10. So this way we do have a priority list and we know what we can plug it in for like the top 5 or top 10 lockdown options to support. I don't know if we will be able to support all of those on the list, but it's getting a good chunk of them for this cycle and for this cycle.
Sounds like a good objective, especially so. What do you think, Sebastian, from a platform perspective? How happy would you be to have more of that be supported for the next cycle? Because that will also require quite a few changes on your side.
I'm not sure we have like much time to spend on it in our team, but like we'll be happy to like help integrating and maybe
Right.
like push a bit further if we can.
Right. That is, if we can identify a subset of what could be done for 12 and then have more of our products actually working on that, how much you could support that effort with all the changes in this patches involved.
Yeah. And I think we got like the community buying. Right.
So launcher, we know it's going to be a difficult one, right? There is a prerequisite development that needs to happen before the launcher can happen.
But even in addressing this problem, just from the standpoint of lockdown, we're going to be solving issues not even related to lockdown, like the upgrade issue that we were discussing. Like say you remove LibreOffice and
Right.
changes.
Right. And that's so launcher, mandatory applications, and so on. Shortcut disabling is the next item on the list. That's on the specification that you made, Gary. So is that something that is easy or difficult?
I think that teams are using t-shirt size. T-shirt sizes to say it's a small or it's a mix app.
So does that sound like a small thing?
Or who can actually answer this question?
For what?
Shortcut disabling, ability to disable shortcuts like Alt F2 or Control Alt T.
That's like small. It's a lot of really small pieces of code in probably several places.
Yeah.
I mean, like just in compass config, the way I have it now is just a distributed ships file. It's just minus 2 files, 2 keys, and all. And then you can specify exactly what values it. So you can
the
be
keys that are locked.
yeah, so there are particular like keys or settings which are locked down. So you can say like these particular sets of values are
Right, but that's not like the keyboard shortcut, right? Like locking down Alt F2, that doesn't correspond to any specific preferences.
it corresponds to settings being because
No, the ability to change which keyboard shortcut Alt F2 is a key.
Oh,
Like
okay.
pressing Alt F2 isn't modifying the key, but that's still an action you may want to do.
Right.
So it's this other kind of locking.
And while we're at it, would that require specific design input or?
Well, I think if that is forbidden, you just do nothing.
Just do nothing, right? So in this case, design. I mean, there's no design impact.
Well, actually, one way of implementing that might just be to change the keyboard shortcut for Alt F2 to disable and unlock it. Maybe there's other ways of activating that same action. I don't know.
So ability to write system and devices menu item is the next one on the list.
So that's like something that's actually in the UI. So in that case, we would have some key just saying item settings.
So it'd be something for the system indicator to store.
Yeah, and anything that's not something that the user can already use themselves has to have an explicit UI because it doesn't already exist.
Design impact, well, as long as we're considering it acceptable as a configuration to remove those entries for administrative reasons. Otherwise, no impact, I suppose. But speaking under the control of entities, feel free to look out. Ability to write specific indicators, which is also
That's probably there for the most part. It's the non-default, just removing the package.
Yeah, but you don't want to do that because then you only want to remove the indicator for non-administrator users and when the admin logs in, they still have it. So removing the package is not really.
So Ubuntu UDS specific indicators, I think here it's a bit dangerous in that I would expect some indicators to be always there at times, whereas some optional indicators we may want to let the administrator remove. By that I mean the gear in the system indicator.
Well, I think we should start on the assumption that the system administrator knows what they're doing. I don't think we should block the system administrator. If they want to remove the gear and they have some other way of the user being able to log out, then that's good for them.
Yeah, but there are also design ramifications there. That is, we want as much as possible to preserve a consistent user interface.
No, you can't trump the system administrator,
Right.
because if you try to do that, they're going to find a way to get around what you did anyway.
Yeah,
I mean, this is free software in the end, right? So we can't approach it from that angle.
But what I think we can do is make it easy to hide the ones for the precinct are optional, and make it possible, but not necessarily not trying to hide something, but you know, like if we're talking about a mode for the deconf editor to remove some indicators, that be a switch, right? So that is remove this one, remove this one, remove this one, because they're optional. And then if you really want us to remove the like the core indicators, that's another key that requires listing, you know, particular indicators, .so or things like that. Right? But if you really want to do that, if you know what you're doing.
I don't think we want to make anything practical for this.
Yeah.
Like certainly if we have a UI, we don't want to like suggest ridiculous things in the UI.
Right.
But if it's like some key, we don't want to be able to say that some values are okay in this key and other ones are going to prevent them.
So
Like we really want there to be one easy way, uniform to do it. We don't want to prevent them from doing things that we don't
so
think
it'd be
are
a generic mechanism for presenting our indicators, right? And that'd be a small, so that is the relatively generic mechanism. Okay. Design impact. Document. Guideline. Which one?
So that's an interesting example because in some ways the sound volume is almost a preference. For example, if I set it to a certain value and I log out and log in again, I expect to have the same value when I log in again. I don't think that's stored in deconf, it's probably stored persistently somewhere else. But imagining that as a setting that isn't deconf, you could just lock the value and force the user to have a certain sound volume. It's sort of an interesting thing, and I think that would be the ideal way of doing user can't change the sound volume, is you specify what you want the volume to be, you would lock it.
So the next item is the ability to dynamically add icon to the launcher.
Okay, that's
I
right.
see it's supported, but API for doing that, there is an API for doing that, because this is what we're doing with the software side. So I think this one we can skip. And then there's a long list of settings, and just that.
Yeah. And preventing installation software, that would be policy kit, right? Today.
Yeah, I mean, we, by default, users are already prevented from installing software.
Sure. So,
Only if you're like an administrator or whatever. Actually, I think you can install software that's in the archive now without a password. Or you can run updates with that password?
Yeah, you can install updates, only updates.
Yeah, so we probably want to change that.
To prevent update, right? Or prevent installing updates. I'll change that. Oh, so can I change that?
What do you recommend we do, because we're at the end of the session, in order to review the rest of the desktop settings, that we do another session to...
Well, I think MPT is right about, yeah, I think we do need design review of each of these things in terms of how, on the 3 points, how is the admin going to express it, what's going to happen to the user when they try to do it, how are they going to know that it's locked down.
Yeah. Sorry, MPT, launcher lockdown support. Regarding that. Otherwise,
We are out of time here. So we can work with Matthew for design review. More feedback. Do you have other feedback on anything specifically?
The most interesting takeaway from this for me is the settings list thing. And it's useful to know what use cases you have in mind because that's going to affect my design. So like, you know, being able to have mandatory items, for example, is affecting what I need to be able to provide with.
Does anyone else have anything before we close?
I just added the work pattern for MPT with a question mark, so I wonder if you're to take this one.
Sorry. From my point of view, as a system administrator in corporate, so I'm curious about how easy to set mandate settings for dconf. Please scroll down to implementation. On gconf, we can easily set mandate value in a gconf, but dh, on the other hand, G settings dconf, we cannot use to lock down with DHG settings. It just set the default value, not.
Why? So you're talking about setting mandatory values for packages?
Sorry?
So you're saying using dev helper?
Dev helper, yeah.
So I don't understand why you're using.
My company create my company specific Debian package to set to change users settings.
So what I think you would want to do is you would want this package to install files and accept dconf like site .d and some key files for the settings and the logs. And then you would have a post-install script in a package that runs dconf update.
Yeah, currently I do, but.
And that's not working?
Hey?
Is that not working or?
Yeah, dconf lockdown is working.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. And on the other hand, Firefox preferences, I must manually replace the etc Firefox system pref.js in the Firefox package. We have to replace it with dpkg divert. So if we can put the settings and other directory, it might be very helpful.
You want the whole directory to drop references?
Sorry?
You want the directory to drop references into? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I think so.
No, I mean, we had to carry quite a large distro patch to have that feature before. And I dropped it because it was just being used by people in the other also. And I'm quite close to adding a directory into it. We just dropped it as well.
And to directly address the question about adding support to DHG settings for lockdown support, I don't think that's a good idea.
Sorry?
For adding lockdown support to DHG settings, I don't think that that's appropriate. Because that's for like applications to be using as I understand it. Does that make sense? DHG settings is for like applications. Yeah, so that's really like something completely different from having a package that's like a site package for having lockdown settings. I think you should probably just do that manually because it's really only something that will happen in that case. And it's probably quite easy to write a post-ins that just runs dconf updates.
Sorry.
The point about where the admin UI, whether the admin UI should ship by default. Not sure. There is always a space discussion.
We have so much space now. Like,
Sure.
Yeah, I don't see it as being something that's necessary. Right.
There's gotta be something.
Maybe we could record the work package that is
Expansion.
Can I just clarify the level where we're talking about system settings? For example, the appearance, we're not just talking about allowing user access to appearance settings. We could optionally have access to appearance settings that may be
Not able to change background
but
or...
not to change themes, for example.
Yeah.
We're talking about that.
Yeah, we're talking about quite reasonably granular, yeah.
And indeed, you can already do that just by locking, because everything that now opens up in the default. So you can lock down that specific. In the case of appearances panel, there's sort of this long-standing bug that if you do lock it down, it looks like you can change it, you can't. So somebody just needs to go in there and like write a patch to wire it up so that
It grays out.
set of the UI grays out.
So the big job is doing all the wiring. The big job is doing the wiring.
Yes. And again, the wiring's not automatically in simple cases, but that's sort of complicated because there's a number of keys, there's a number of UI elements, and they don't bind one-to-one.
Okay,
All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
I think we're done.
Steve, will you talk about the Ubuntu object?
your team?
I'm asking. Okay.
All right.